I'll be speaking with Colin Beavan, author and filmmaker. Some of you may know him from the film No Impact Man. He took 1 year and he didn't waste anything, and the idea was to produce no garbage. And it was really important. I'm very familiar with the film. I show it in my classes, and it's changed how I look at the garbage I produce. He's also got a great new book, which he'll be telling us about. So welcome, Colin. Great to see you today.
Hi, Heidi. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. So can you tell us about your new book, what it's about and why you wrote it and kind of the central pieces of it?
It's called How to Be Alive, A Guide to the Kind of Happiness That Helps the World. And it comes as a result of my previous book, No Impact Man. After No Impact Man, I traveled pretty much around the world talking to audiences who were, and the big question that they kept asking me was, how can I live in a way where I feel happy about my life, but I also feel as though I'm addressing myself to the crises in the world? And How to Be Alive kind of results from that question. It's a book about that, like how do we live happily? Yes, but how do we live happily in a way that also helps the rest of the world too?
So what are some of the answers that you came up with for that? I mean, those are really important questions.
The research actually shows that the things, when we pursue values that make us happy, those same values are the values that actually activate our generosity and munificence and stuff like that. So there are two sets of values. One set of values are values that we think of as materialistic values, and those values, when we pursue them, actually don't make us happy and tend to make us so that we don't help the world. And then there are intrinsic values. Those are values like community, affiliation with other people, health, spirituality. When we pursue those values in our own life, they actually make us happier, but they also activate our generosity and our desire to do good in the world. So How to Be Alive is basically about pursuing those values in your life.
That's interesting. So did you find when you were doing your year of having as little impact as possible, did you find that you were happier?
So we live in this consumerist society where basically we're supposed to go the long way around to get the stuff we need. Like we think we need a lot of money and a lot of stuff for happiness, but meanwhile, so many people I know are working 10, 12, 14-hour days, not able to spend time with the people that they love, not able to do what they consider important in their lives, not able to use their prized skills and passions. And so when I lived as environmentally as possible over the course of the year, what it meant was not pursuing the chase for stuff so much and actually spending more time with the people that I loved, eating food that was good for me because we ate only local food, traveling in ways that made me healthier because I walked and biked. So yes, it turns out that living in ways that are better for the planet are also better for us as individuals too.
And are you finding, I'm curious, for my own interest, are you finding that people are tending to do things that are better for the environment on purpose in terms of pursuing the thing they love? Or is it the other way around? Doing the thing they love tends to have less of an impact, if that makes sense.
I think that there's a movement of people in the world that I call life questers. And those are people that they want to be happy for themselves, yes, but they recognize that there is no happiness that no one of us can be as happy as we want to be unless the whole world is doing well too. It's like the era of self-help is kind of over because it's like looking for the best deck chair on the Titanic. The Titanic sunk, and having the best position on it it doesn't matter. We actually need to work together to keep the boat afloat. So this movement of people that I call life questers are people that recognize that. And there's definitely a group of people around the world who are actively questing for ways of living that are both better for them and better for the planet and better for their communities and better for society as a whole.
That's fantastic. I love the idea of your book. I'm definitely going to recommend it to a lot of people. I've enjoyed I haven't read the whole thing yet, I'll be honest, but I've read pieces of it and I really do appreciate the message. I've found that,
Thanks.
Really it's very meaningful to me. in terms of the no impact issue, since that's high on my mind, I just watched your film last week again. Are you still doing that? To what extent are you living with a sort of no impact vision?
I say, I used to be no impact man. Now I'm medium impact man.
Okay.
Um, the thing is, so much of what I did to be no impact made a lot of sense for my life. Like I said before, so in New York, where I live, for example, it's very common for people to take taxis to the gym to then get on a treadmill and run in place. It makes sense for me in my life to ride my bike to get around and get my exercise at the same time. Or similarly, the food that's better for the environment, unpackaged, organically grown, real food as opposed to processed food-like products, are better for me and they're better for the environment. So, I continue to do that. I continue to eat food that's good for me. Buying secondhand is way less expensive than buying new. And also, if you buy secondhand things that work when you buy them, they actually, for various reasons, are likely to last longer than buying new because things fail when they're very new. So they come pre-tested. So there's all sorts of ways to live environmentally that are actually better. And so I totally maintain those habits.
And are you still really advocating for that? Is it sort of part of your mission to talk about this need to live with less of an impact?
My mission is to engage people in the quest for a way of life that's better for them and better for the world. How that applies to any one individual depends on the individual. So some people, for that, they're passionate about environmental living, in which case I encourage and support that. But other people might be, for example, really passionate about Black Lives Matter, in which case I really encourage and support that. So what I work on is helping people to, I say, it's live with ease and live with importance. So when I say live with ease, it means making choices that are better for them, that make them happier, that are better for the world. And to live with importance means to make sure that other people can live better lives too.
That's a really fantastic message. So I know you do workshops. Is this sort of do you feel like are you teaching this as a kind of teaching, in other words, as a practice?
Sure. I mean, I think we're in a time when people are really confused about how to live. All the kind of standard life, what I call standard life approaches, are failing. This idea that you should go to college no matter how much debt you have to go in to do it, then you should get a job in some corporation, no matter whether it means you have to pretend to be somebody you're not. Then you should get a big mortgage and buy a house, and et cetera, and somehow or another that will turn out for you to have a good life and you can feel as though you're a productive part of society. That approach is failing for a lot of people. It's not making individuals happy, and even if you do manage to succeed at it, you can't help having the feeling that you're kind of getting success at the expense of everybody else. And so people are confused how to live. So this work that I do with first the book How to Be Alive, and I have this teleseminar class, How to Be Alive, the How to Be Alive masterclass, is about helping people find a new way of living, which is both where they get to feel as though they are living a life that's good for them, and not ignoring the problems in the world, but actually assisting with them.
That makes a lot of sense. So I wonder, though, about the question of people who are, struggling with this idea of how are they going to survive, right? They have to get a job. They do want to go to college. It is expensive. They do have loans. So there's sort of the practical side of how do they balance that? If they, they don't have enough money, if you're forced to do a job you don't love because you have to pay bills in order to live somewhere, and the way our society's set up, it is so expensive and increasingly so.
Well, most of us are forced to do jobs that we don't love. That's the sad thing. And so what I advocate for is actually starting by working on the outsides of your life rather than the core. Like most times when we talk about living in line with our values, we think that means either changing your job, changing your partner, or changing where you live, which sounds daunting. It's just too much and too big. And because it sounds so daunting, we never get started at all. We don't make any changes. So what I suggest is that we actually start with our relationships with the world at the outside, like how do we eat? How do we participate civically? How do we transport ourselves? How do we purchase? How do we interact with our community? How are we with our friends? How do we actually behave at work? These are smaller, bite-sized things that we can deal with, and we can begin to change. When we begin to change those things bit by bit, we come to a place in our lives where it supports a larger change, where we've changed things at the edges, and something bigger can happen. If you're temperamentally inclined, going on a march or writing to your politician or joining an activist group, there are different ways that we can change the world, but it's definitely not at odds with the idea that we need to change policy. We need to change both policies and regulations, and we need to change the culture. So the question is, how, as an individual, do you actually get involved in all of that?
There is the kind of cultural thing, though, of living in New York City or living in a place where you can walk everywhere or ride a bike everywhere. For many people who live in suburbs or where there's that disconnect, where they're forced to drive cars, for instance. Do you have any answers about that? You know, we have a country that's built largely on suburbia.
Sure. I mean, how we live in a way that helps the world depends on our context and our situation. There's no connect the dots approach for everybody. So if you're thinking in terms of transportation or saving energy, if you live in the city, you can ride a bike, but chances are you can't put solar panels on your roof. Whereas if you live on the suburbs, you might be able to put solar panels on your roof, but you can't ride a bike. And all of us, as we just talked about, all of us can participate civically. All of us are capable of, and voting is not, vote 5 minutes every 4 years doesn't count as civic participation. Actually being involved in our communities and knowing our politicians and talking to them and letting them know and participating in different sorts of actions to pressure our politicians to do the right thing. It doesn't matter whether you live in the city or the suburbs.
I agree with you completely. So I think that's really important. And I like this idea if you align with who you really are, in some way you're going to be active and you're going to be a participant in society and with other people and connecting. And so in that way, changes will come about, which are healthy for you as a person, but also for the larger society. I think that's what you're saying?
Yeah, so I mean, the question, there's a lovely quote by a Christian writer called Frederick Buckner, and he said that it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not, the point remains the same. He said that God calls us to the place where our own greatest joy meets the world's greatest sorrow. So that means it's wonderful because it means how we help the world is not based on martyring ourselves or trying to be somebody that we're not, but actually figuring out who we are, what the gifts are that we have that we love doing, and using those gifts, using our passions in service of our concerns in the world. So who are you? What are you good at? What do you love doing? Then what do you care about in the world? And how do you use what you love doing in service of the things that you care about in the world? And that, actually, I would argue, is the highest level of human actualization. The highest level of human development is to actually become who you are in service of the world.
That word service is key, though. And that's what you were talking about earlier, where we were very much a generation in the 80s and previously of it's all about me, right? I have to help myself. But what you're saying is the helping yourself is really part of that has to be service, and I love that. I think that's fantastic. We need, a lot of people need help, a lot of areas need help, and so it seems like you're saying it doesn't matter where you do that as long as you are doing it. So like you said, Black Lives Matter or the environment, or I'm sure health issues with the kids, or whatever your passion is, as long as you're serving in some way, that's really important.
That's right. So
is there another movie in your future? Do you see making a movie out of this?
Oh, not out of this book. We're always working on various media properties and stuff like that. So, fingers crossed.
Okay, something you can't talk about, it sounds like?
It's not early, not far enough along in development to talk about yet.
I got it. So I would imagine you feel really good about the impact of No Impact Man. I mean, it seems to have had ripple effects. People really, it did speak to all the human beings I know who watch it. It makes them stop and think about what they're using. And I think that was really important. I can't think of a film before that had that kind of effect.
I think No Impact Man helps people to ask themselves, what is my life really for? I think the reason why people connect so much to it is not just because they're asking about the environment, but the people recognize that the causes of our own unhappiness and our environmental unhappiness are actually the same, which is basically the consumer-based economy.
Right.
The idea that somehow our well-being comes from digging resources out of one hole in the ground, molding it into products, getting people to buy these products which they don't actually need, and hoping that they'll throw them away and be put in another hole in the ground as quickly as possible so that they'll buy another product. The idea that we should buy a new car every 3 years and work our rear ends off in order to be able to afford that car every 3 years is both bad for the environment and it's bad for us. And I think No Impact Man helped people to recognize that. And so people could connect and see that the root of human unhappiness and planetary unhappiness are actually the same, and that it's possible to live in ways, not just individually, but societally. It's possible to have an economy that doesn't run on the throughput of resources.
Right.
And it's possible to have a life that's not based on, just being on a treadmill running after more stuff.
Exactly. The story of stuff is a shortened version of what you're doing in the film. And the film's interesting too because it brings your family and the conflict and, your partner and how she didn't want to participate the way you did. And I think that's something we all deal with on some level. I mean, my students' reaction and my friends' reaction, when I'm in the store and I don't want to use that plastic bag, and my daughter says, don't say that too loudly, because she knows I get really upset when that reusable, whatever it is, gets thrown at me, and before I can say no, don't give that to me. And there's that challenge between educating people and it's being your own calling, right? Being the thing that you feel you need to do, and maybe the other person doesn't get it yet, isn't there, doesn't agree, So it's interesting. Your film kind of brings that up, which I think is important. Because we all face it. We might want to do it, but then there's peer pressure. What will my friends think? And for kids too, I think that's key, So I appreciate it, and I really value what you're doing, and that you're trying to live what you believe and walk the walk, as they say. And it's important for all of us to have role models and examples of ways to do that. So I appreciate that. So I want to just thank you so much for being on today, and look forward to reading more of your work. I hope you do make another film that has that kind of message. It's an important one, and I love the humor in No Impact Man, so I hope you infuse some of that. And I thank you for coming on today.
Thanks so much, Hattie. It was good to talk to you.
Take care. Colin's words are really wise and helpful. Recommend his book to everyone, How to Be Alive. I also recommend No Impact Man, because we're in a time of serious, sustainable crisis. We need to not be so wasteful. We need to be mindful of what we buy, what we use. So thanks so much, and see you next time. Watch our other videos. We have great shows on sustainability issues, and see you soon.